So, first things first, we have to talk about what is Doomerism. And according to Wikipedia, Doomers are people who are extremely pessimistic, fatalistic about global problems, such as overpopulation, peak oil, climate change, ecological overshoot, pollution, nuclear weapons, and the runaway of artificial intelligence. The term and its associated term, Doomerism, rose primarily on social media. So, as a way to simplify it, I would say that doomerism is basically over catastrophizing a situation to a point where you're paralyzed and you have no hope for the future and you just have given up entirely. So, I guess you must be asking at this point, Run for Roses, what does this have to do with K-pop? And, well, I do believe doomerism in general has a lot to do with life in the political state of the world right now, but also it has to do with K-pop. And I think if we tackle K-pop in the aspect of fandom first, maybe we'll be able to understand how to tackle doomerism in every part of life. So, here's some examples to start actually grasping the understanding of doomerism in K-pop. First, I think the biggest example is ITZY. The idea that ITZY has fallen off completely and they are no longer a top girl group anymore and they're failures. And, I think it's pretty interesting that, just because you're not scoring number ones every single time you have an album means that you're a complete failure. No, ITZY has only just consolidated a solid and strong fan base, and I think people don't understand that each of the members have so much star power. They are doing just fine. They're just not going viral for literally breathing. That's all that there is to it. So a second opinion I see is NMIXX are very talented, but unfortunately their music is horrible. This is an interesting take because this was developed back in 2022. Again, as much as I love their debut project, I can agree that I know exactly where JYP went wrong, and I know exactly why people don't like it. Like, when you watch the music video, it just makes sense why people were confused, right? However, it's been it's been 3 years since the girls have debuted, and 3 years in K-pop is a long, long time. And in fact, K-pop moves so quickly that opinions and takes about certain idols and groups and their discographies change like in a blink of an eye. And this take is pretty interesting because it has stuck around for much longer than you would expect a take to have, especially in K-pop when things, again, like I said, move at the speed of light. So, seeing in 2025 that, people believe that NMIXX are talented but their music sucks, I feel like it comes from the outdated take in 2022 and, even in 2023. I think, again, I'm not saying that you have to like NMIXX's music from 2024 and 2025 or the following years, next years of when they will produce music, but I do think that this take comes from not actually listening to their modern discography and where it's at and their improvement, because NMIXX, in my opinion, subjectively, have improved immensely, and I think a lot of people, even if they don't like their music, have admitted to the fact that their music has improved, and you can acknowledge that they're on an upward path, even if that music is not for them. So the common theme with both of these takes is that it's very end of the world-esque type energy. You can feel that there's this hopelessness that comes from these takes, and it feels very doomed in their perspective. So, again, this is just a few examples. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you within your own fandoms or the groups that you enjoy probably have seen pretty doomeristic takes. So, I guess the next question is, why are K-pop stans so doomeristic? And that's a good question. And honestly, I feel like the K-pop industry itself runs on extremities. You have to be on two polarizing sides, and it's all black and white, or it's nothing at all. You have to be on an extreme side in order to enjoy K-pop, or you can't do anything at all. So this industry rewards the most extreme behaviors, whether that is quite literally starving idols or making them practice to insane amounts of hours. Whatever it is, the K-pop industry rewards extremities, and it thrives off of the extreme reactions that people have to it, whether that is pure hatred of the entire genre, or there is an absolute obsession to the point where it's almost dangerous. And the thing about K-pop is the fact that K-pop's a very expensive hobby, and for a lot of people, because it's a hobby that is not a part of their language, they have to interact with it, I don't know how to explain it, but in a very indirect sense. You have to go through a lot of hoops in order to consume some of your favorite idol's content, because you don't speak Korean or you don't live in Korea, and in fact, because K-pop is so expensive to have as a hobby, you don't get to, sometimes, a lot of fans just don't get. And the fact that K-pop itself, being into this hobby, is very expensive if you really, really want to engage in it, because, albums are so expensive. Concert tickets, light sticks, it's so expensive to be a K-pop fan. And the thing is that a lot of people can't afford to engage in these things simply because they're too young, and a lot of K-pop fans happen to be teenagers. But at the same time, even if you are an adult, I think the last thing you have on your list as a priority, unless if you have a spending problem, is a Blackpink light stick. I don't think that's going to be your main priority. I think paying the bills, paying rent, I think that's going to be your main priority. So that being said, a lot of K-pop stans feel kind of isolated from that sense of being engaged in the fandom. So what they do is, for a lot of K-pop stans, their only exposure to K-pop and their only means of actually engaging with their favorite idols is through social media. And as we know from the past couple of years, social media has just gotten even more toxic. So many platforms award polarizing takes, clickbait, and toxicity. It's like an award, and people gain so much virality, and even if it's temporary, some prominence. So that being said, it's so interesting to see the toxicity of social media that awards polarization and very, very unnuanced thinking, and K-pop coming together and creating this this concoction of toxicity. It's very interesting to study because social media rewards this level of toxicity, and an industry that rewards the people who consume it to be very, very polarized in their own values and takes, and to be very extreme. So there's more revenue, and there's more interest, and there's more obsession in their idols. Wait, let me rephrase that. There's more obsession from the audience towards their idols. I think that's more perfectly worded, or better worded. But that being said, I think because K-pop stans, a lot of K-pop stans can only interact with K-pop through social media. For a lot of them, engaging with K-pop as best as they can, and when I mean best, I mean as heavily as they can go into that toxic headspace and be consumed by what the algorithm wants them to do and act and say, because I feel like a lot of stans feel like they're missing out, and to them it feels like they're not experiencing the epic highs and lows of high school football. I'm sorry, that was, I'm sorry, that was like such an unnecessary reference. There was no need to say that. Anyway, let's get back on track. And because I feel like a lot of K-pop stans miss out on going to concerts, getting merch, yada yada yada, I feel like they need to engage with it through social media to a heavy extent, or else they feel like they're not a proper stan. And here's the thing. The minute you win from the K-pop industry, and the minute you win against Twitter and social media, is when you find out that you're a human being and you have the autonomy and the ability to go at your own pace. The minute you find balance is when you defeat what the K-pop industry and what social media is trying to throw at you. In fact, it's just not the K-pop industry, it's everything in general. Right? The minute you can go at your own pace, I think you can do so much good when you find out what works for you. Now, getting back to the discussion of Doomerism, again, because, again, when you have been entirely consumed by social media in the industry, an industry like K-pop, I think you start to think in the ways that they want you to think, and that is to be doomeristic, because it's the idea that everything is extremely bad all the time or extremely good, and it's just not healthy to think that way. So when I see people have takes like, oh, ITZY's gone forever, like they're flops, or, you know, this group is going to lose their position on first and they'll never come back again, or so what and so forth, it makes me realize how much people do not believe in the concept of nuance or understanding that life is not linear. You've heard the saying that healing is not linear, but so is life. We're going to have ups and downs, and things are going to get bad, and things are going to be excellent. You can't stop those things from happening because that's life, and life is inevitable. Inevitable. Yeah, I said the word right. Okay, so for this part of the video, I want to talk about the 3 things that make up Doomerism in K-pop. Now, the thing is that this is my observation. I could be wrong, and you could add on to the conversation. I do not mind. But here are the 3 things that I think has led to the Doomerism aspect of K-pop. Idealization / romanticization. 2, I would say there is a lot of overgeneralization. And 3, privilege. I think privilege has a lot to do with the doomer mindset that a lot of people have in the fandom. Okay, let's focus on romanticization idealization. I feel like they could be the same word, but you get what I mean. So basically, the dictionary definition of romanticization is to deal or describe an idealized or unrealistic fashion, make something seem better than it is or more appealing than it really is. So I think a lot of people tend to go down this route in K-pop where it's like some people think genuinely they speak about their favorite groups as if they're the best thing to have ever have existed since sliced bread. And, talking about, like, how they're the greatest vocalists, how they're the greatest rappers, the greatest dancers. And this, like, romanticized version of, like, how great they are. And also the fact that sometimes, again, the parasociality also kicks in where they truly feel like their idols are the best people to have ever walked the earth, and how they would be such great girlfriends, great boyfriends, or like how they're so innocent and so perfect. You know what I'm saying? That's romanticized. So when that illusion breaks and when that glass shatters, the polarization that comes in, and apparently it's so heartbreaking to so many people because the parasociality kind of has overtaken them. Like, it's a part of their brain, and it's quite literally affecting how they think rationally, and it's heartbreaking for them, and they end up going down a more extreme route of being, oh, this person is terrible, I feel betrayed, and going down a very, like, I don't know how to say it, negative route. Because again, I do feel like, again, if the idol has done something horrifically bad, right? Again, disliking them to that extent is very valid. Like, like racism or quite literally hurting another person. That is a very valid reason to feel hurt and feel upset that the idol did something, right? But if that idol happens to, I don't know, start dating, God forbid, some people's illusions break so harshly, like, it is so harsh for them to accept the fact that their idols are human beings their favorite idols are human beings who have feelings and can fall in love. It hurts them, and because they live in a state of polarization, they end up going down a heavily polarized route where it's no longer they're perfect, they're amazing. No. They go down the opposite where they start hating the idol and feel this strong resentment and hatred and betrayal. So it leads to that happening a lot, and it leads to not actually having thoughtful or helpful conversations about idols, because people either hate idols or they love idols. And again, I'm not saying that there's people who are in the middle where if a situation happens, I'm not saying there's people who are not nuanced, because again, there's nuance to nuance, okay? And, you have to understand that there's people who are rational, who are able to argue with nuanced and not unbiased, but they're able to think critically of a situation. So the second point is overgeneralization, and I think this point comes from the fact that people only think in black and white. For example, this entire group's discography is this, and this. And this assumption is actually based off of what their title tracks are, instead of actually studying their entire discography. Or if an idol has a slip up on stage, that slip up becomes their image for several months or even years. And that becomes like an overgeneralization of who they are as a person. And I think because we cannot discuss, I think because a lot of people, a lot of stans they treat idols like characters in an anime or like a show or a video game instead of a human being. So I feel like overgeneralization just comes so naturally to so many people because it's so easy to turn your favorite idols into characters in video games in so many people's brains. And, your screw up could be like something that people will always bring up, or it shapes how people view you. And instead of actually having a deep dive on your skills, some people just refer to that, or simply having a take. For example, bringing back the NMIX example, the idea that NMIX's music has been terrible, and like they're talented, but like their music is terrible. I think that's a really huge, again, it's an outdated take, but it's also a very, very, very huge overgeneralization of their discography. Because if anything, their most controversial music happened in 2022, and using that to generalize their entire discography, which has changed from the 3 years they've been in the public's eye, I think that's not helpful to the group at all. Factor within overgeneralization, or I guess it could be its own category, is ignorance. A lot of people have and want to have a take on K-pop, a criticism of it, to have an opinion, to have an analysis, but unfortunately we don't know everything. It's important to understand that you're a human being and you're not going to know everything about the industry. But I do feel like people who simply want to have a say in the argument, a say in the debate, often tend to jump the gun and have takes that they don't really apply to them, or they have an ignorant take that is really, really, really half-baked, and they may have something that's going on and something of value, but because they don't know enough about it, they end up making the conversation a lot more convoluted, and it leads to, again, I feel like it adds into the overgeneralization, because some people might rely on generalizing a group or an idol or a topic as a way to, I don't know how to explain it, but as a way to show, like, that they have an understanding of the topic without being specific. I hope I said that right. I keep messing up my words. I apologize. But that being said, I feel like overgeneralization helps to empower and enlarge the impact of Doomerism through, simply generalizing things and not arguing that groups, music, situations, events are quite nuanced, and we have to argue about how complex humans are. And I think, overgeneralizing things leads to people going in more polarized routes, because for some people, they may not feel comfortable being on the middle ground of the conversation and arguing about the nuances on both sides. And they might feel like it is only best and safe enough if they are on a very extremely generalized side, because, well, that's the most prominent arguments to have ever existed in the fandom space. And the last thing I want to add to this point is that, I think there's a huge difference. I think we, again, tend to overgeneralize people's arguments to the point where we kind of group people into different bubbles, and I feel like there's so many people who have to claim that, like, hey, I have an opinion, but I'm getting, clumped in with these people who are actually genuinely hateful. So, it leads to the voices who want to speak nuance to be quiet because they don't feel safe to do so. So, for example, I think, okay, I'm bringing back ITZY for my example this time. I think there's merit to people saying, yeah, I'm surprised that a group with that big of a company and a group who has the ability and the wealth to be able to do better in the public's eye isn't doing as well. Like, I think that's a valid thing to say because I do feel like companies do have so much money and I don't feel like they use that money properly to help their groups to succeed, right? But I think that's a valid statement while having the statement that, oh my gosh, ITZY has fallen off completely. Like, look at their view count. It is so low. It's over. Their careers are done. I think there's a difference between these two statements. I think one is an observation of how drastic the view count for ITZY's music videos have dropped and talking about how even because they're part of a big four company, their company should be doing better to, promote them and to do something to make these girls go back into spotlight or in a state of constant virality if that's what their goal is, I suppose. But, that is, again, a critique that I think is pretty valid. However, it did not knock on the group. It did not say that the group was a failure. It just simply made an observation that JYP could do better. That line did not say that they were doomed. It was simply an observation of, yes, ITZY could do better. The second line was interesting because it almost feels like that person has given up and they feel like everything is completely over and they feel like ITZY will never come back again and it's just like the end of the world. So that's what I'm saying. I don't want valid critiques to be muddled into the bubble of Doomerism, right? Again, don't overgeneralize everyone who may have a negative critique or just simply a critique of your favorite group as doomers. Because, again, critique is so important in order to help the progression and help with the process and the creation of art. My third point and my last point would be, I forgot the word. What was it called? Yes, privilege. Personally, I think that a lot of people who are doomers happen to be huge fans of groups from the big four companies, and they often don't realize that even if their group is only having like 20 million views on their music video, they still have the money, they still have the financial backing, they still have the prominence of their company to stay afloat. A lot of people don't realize how privileged they are that their favorite groups are under a big four company, because a lot of smaller groups do not have the luxury, even if they have like maybe 3 or 4 million views on their music video, that might not be enough to keep them afloat, right? Understand that 20 million views on a music video for your favorite K-pop group is not the end of the world. In fact, maybe they have consolidated a loyal fan base that doesn't rely merely on casual listeners anymore. Maybe that's where they're at. And I think like people are quite privileged because their group is a part of a part of a coalition that is not coalition, but it's part of a company that will still keep going if they only score that amount of views, right? So I feel like, because also there's a lot of competition, right? But I think the Doomerism comes in with privilege is that I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like a lot of K-pop stans have it easy because their favorite K-pop group, again, I'm going to say this, won't get shut down after one comeback is, I don't know, only gets like 20 million views. In fact, I think that would just drive the creative team to go back to the drawing board to do better. And there's this privilege where you don't have to worry that you won't ever see them again, or they might disappear for like a year because that comeback only scored, I don't know, like 10 million views. And apparently that was not enough for the group to, again, stay afloat. I know I'm repeating my point, but what I'm trying to say is that because that group is part of a fourth gen group, there's this inherent expectation where they're always going to perform, they're always going to do well, and because they're part of the mainstream line of K-pop, that they will be the top rated girl group, boy group, they will reap the most rewards, they will have the most amount of views on their music videos, the most streams, yada yada yada. And, you know, I think people don't understand that sometimes your favorite group won't always reach that place because it's simply not possible to always be number one. And because of this extreme expectation of a big four group to always outperform and always outdo and always just be on top, I feel like when this doesn't happen, it creates fear in people that their favorite group, even though is, you know, a part of a fourth gen group, is not fourth gen, but a big four group, is failing. And because there's that heavy expectation that has been laid upon those companies that they're going to be the most successful, when a lot of fans, when those expectations don't come through, it feels like an alarm bell is going off and something bad is happening, and, you know, they feel like it's like the end of the world because those expectations are set so high that when maybe one comeback or two comebacks don't go charting number one, it's like, oh gosh, they're part of a big four girl group, not big four girl group, a big four company. Why are they not doing well? And what's going on? There's this sense of fear and confusion, and I think because people have this obsession with charting and being on top, they don't realize that sometimes you don't need 200 million views within 48 hours to be successful. Sometimes your artistic body of work may only have, I don't know, 15 million streams, which is quite a lot, by the way, or just 20 million views on their music video, but it's just, it doesn't mean the group is a failure. It's just that their success looks different than what is objective, what society thinks is objective success, which is 100 million views, rewards, topping charts, yada yada yada. I keep saying that, but you know what I mean. So I think a lot of fans have to understand that their favorite group could be a part of but like a big four group, and it's not the end of the world if they're not following the societal expectations of what people have of big four K-pop idols and K-pop groups, because I think this just feeds into the doomerism aspect of, again, heavy expectations and having materialistic tendencies and being fed into this idea that 100 million views in 24 hours is what success is. But it's not. Success comes in all different phases, and for some groups that comes with 20 million views and having a very, very, very beloved discography, and for some is genuinely getting 1 billion views on a music video and being a global success. So, basically what I'm saying is that doomerism actually stops progress from genuinely happening, because it only allows people to be on two extreme sides, and it doesn't really allow for any freedom of genuine expression without being scrutinized. And I think that doesn't really work, because K-pop, regardless of the manufactured nature that it is, it's still a place where art comes from, and we should discuss art like art, because language and art knows no bounds, but we should be able to critically and thoughtfully analyze a piece of art, no matter what you think of it, no matter however you dislike it, or however you feel you love it, right? I think doomerism has stopped this critical analysis, this critical thinking. Not completely, but I think it has stopped on a lot of social media platforms, because it's sometimes unsafe to do so. And I feel like it stops people from treating K-pop like it is a medium for art. I don't think people see it as that anymore, but rather a competition. And, I think in a world where we should be making video essays about the meaningful nature of Red Velvet MVs and their lyrics, we're stuck in a timeline where we're fighting over which K-pop idol looks better in the color pink. And if we don't choose the idol that is the most, air quotes, correct option, you're apparently a terrible person and you hate that idol, and you are basically the worst person on earth, and we are all doomed to be punished because you didn't choose that option. That's where we're stuck on. We're stuck in a timeline of competition rather than the timeline of analysis and discussion and appreciation, and it sucks. But I will leave you with one last thing. We may be cooked, but we're not doomed, because the minute we give into doom, we stop and lose the ability to believe that things can get better. And if there's one thing we need to understand, is that we have more power than we realize. And to give into the idea that K-pop and the K-pop community cannot get better is already admitting defeat. So we might be cooked, but we're not done for.